My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am what I am.
I'm joined today on Zoom by our very good friend and South Dublin Councillor Francis Timmons. Francis, welcome back to Dublin City FM and welcome back to LGBTQlife.
How you doing, Mick? Thanks for having me on.
Francis, I suspect you've been very busy this week, and I suspect it's been quite an emotional week because you've been involved in, dare I say it, having a few memories dragged up again. What's your initial response to the report that's just come out into the mother and baby homes? Was it disappointment? Was it anger? What was your initial response?
How you doing, Mick? Yes, as you said, it's been a dramatic week for survivors of the institutions with the Commission of Inquiry report that came out this week. Unfortunately, my initial views are that it's been a bit of a whitewash in terms of to me it appears that a lot of the responsibility has been taken away from the church and state, and that there's a lot of blame being put on parents and on the mothers. And then the other thing that was very disappointing with the report is that while they talk about a medical card and they also talk about redress, they're saying now that you have to be over 6 months in an institution to be eligible for either, which would eliminate an awful lot of the mothers. Because obviously some mothers didn't spend longer than 6 months there, so they wouldn't be eligible for that. Now, Minister O'Gorman has since said that he will relook at this, because I think this has to be looked at. I mean, that can't be allowed to continue the way it is. But overall, I mean, look, I suppose people have waited a lifetime for this report. I mean, 75 years of horror stories. And look, I welcome the fact that the report is finally published after 5 years. I also welcome that we're discussing it like we are today, and that the media are discussing and they're discussing real stories, real people, because at the end of the day, this is what's behind all this. These were very real people. 163,000 people that were in all the homes.
Yeah. Let's step back just slightly, Francis. You had experience of these homes. Now, you may not have remembered it, but tell us, what's your engagement with, say, this report, and how do you feature as an individual?
Yeah, I was born in 1971, Mick, to an unmarried mother at the time, which in Ireland at that time was probably one of the biggest crimes, but it wasn't officially a crime, but it was definitely considered as a sin. And the Catholic Church, particularly with other churches, but particularly the Catholic Church, were in total control of every fabric of society. So anyway, when I was born, it was decided that I couldn't stay with a mother that wasn't married, and I was put into one of the county homes, Madonna House out in Blackrock, where obviously I was, later on, I was joined by a brother, and I had a brother and a sister also in St. Pat's in the Navan Road. They were back in the 60s, they were there. So 71, I went into Madonna House, and pretty horrendous. The conditions in Madonna House at the time were pretty bad from what I hear. And there was a report done soon after I moved in. The report came out that it wasn't suitable or wasn't fit to have anybody living there. So they built a new Madonna House beside it. And I moved in then to the new Madonna House, I think about 18 months after, obviously, it was built. And there I was used to part of the vaccine trials in 1973. And the vaccine trials, for anybody that doesn't know, there were 7 vaccine trials between 1934 and 1973, and I was used in them in 73.
Can I just come back to something, Francis? We should point out that in 1971, contraception was illegal. It was a criminal offence to use contraception. I mean, might your circumstances, now I'm not trying to lessen this in any regard, have been somewhat different if we had had a more enlightened attitude to to birth control, even just to condoms?
Absolutely, Mick. I think the issue is that we had such a negative view of sexuality and sex, and I mean, you couldn't talk about it in Ireland then. This was still, the 70s were still a time where we were still coming out. The country was in a bad way financially and stuff, and people went to mass every Sunday. That was the part of their week. I know we certainly did when I was growing up. We went to church, and you went to confession, and you were all the time told about sins, and all that type of. It was that type of culture, that type of regime that we were living under, and basically we were dictated to morally about what the morals of the country were. Thankfully, I mean, since that, in the last 20 years, we've passed marriage equality, and we've repealed the 8th Amendment, and we've moved forward as a country, but we still have an awful lot a way to go.
I put something to you, Francis, and this is a slightly, shall we say, out of left field sort of view on this, is that we talk about taboo and a whole range of shame and all of that. But I used to say back in those days that if you were an alien that came from space and you wanted to screw up with the human brain, you only needed to look at one aspect of human behavior and you really could do some serious brainwashing, and that was sexuality. Do you think that what we had there constituted, to a certain degree, if not state brainwashing, cultural brainwashing?
Absolutely. It was a form of brainwashing. I mean, people didn't have a voice, and those that believed it was wrong, I suppose a lot of people knew what was going on in the institutions, but they didn't stand up because the culture wouldn't have allowed it at the time. So I don't particularly blame those people. I don't think there's, I mean, look, it's years later now, and I don't think there's anything to be benefited totally from. I mean, at the end of the day, this rests with the church and the state. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you, Francis, how long were you in these institutions? How many years? What age were you when you came out?
I was just 4.
Okay, so you would still have quite significant memories, I suspect.
Well, I would, yes, Mick, I would indeed. Like the memories that I have are of, as you get older, Mick, you kind of wonder.
I mean, I remember being at school at 3 and 4, so I mean, you would remember being in these institutions in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, they were as they said in the report. Now I haven't read the whole lot of the report because it's 3,000 pages, but the bits I have read, and we got the briefing from Minister O'Gorman the other day, the webinar. And basically, I could relate to a lot of what he was talking about in terms of the conditions of the county homes were pretty appalling, and they were harsh. There were harsh times. There were cruel times, and there was a lot of sadness attached. I mean, my mother came to see me in 1973, the August, and it was just after I was used in the vaccine trials. And obviously I don't remember this, but it's in my records that I managed to get. And it's written down that while the Sisters of Charity didn't mention the vaccine trials, obviously, they do mention in it that I had, my mother was complaining about that I had scabs on my arms and I was very sick and that I was crying a lot and that I was very distressed. But obviously that was after the vaccine trials. So
yeah. Can I ask you here something, Francis? Because I've seen a photograph of your mother. You look the image of her. I mean, there is no question about whose child that is. I mean, you are so alike absolutely. I mean, you are just so alike. When you came out at 4 years of age, am I right in thinking that you did not go back to your birth mother, that you were fostered out?
I was indeed, yeah. I was fostered out to a family. And within that family, then I was sexually abused. So it wasn't a very positive experience. And again, report actually states in the report that a lot of people that were fostered out or boarded out had very negative experiences. People that were adopted didn't seem to have as, there's kind of comparisons, and I hate comparing one bad situation to another because they were all bad situations. You know what I mean?
Can I ask you then, Francis, why, under normal circumstances, I hate to use the word normal, but under conventional circumstances, somebody in your situation might have been adopted rather than fostered. Was there a particular reason why you were fostered?
Yeah, my mother wouldn't sign anything. She wouldn't agree to it.
Okay.
She was a very strong-willed woman, if you knew her, Mick. She was very...
Oh, look, I know her son. and you know, so I know the character of the family, or but so at that stage, she presumably wasn't married when you were fostered out.
No, she never married. She never got married.
Okay.
Up to the day she died, and she died in 2014, just before I was elected. I think I was on your show just around that time, because
you were indeed. You were one of the first people that were ever on our Council Matters programme. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah. So she had died not too long before that. So I was with her when she died, which was great. I mean, you know, obviously very sad, but it was great that I was, because a lot of survivors don't have pictures, or they don't have. Some people have never even met their mums or their dads. You know that. So
yeah. So can I ask you then, Francis? At 4 years of age, why were you not returned to your birth mother? Did the state suddenly decide that, or did they need to take any legal action, or did somehow or other the state decided that they effectively owned you?
Yeah, the state basically decided. The Sisters of Charity organised it, and as far as I can see, there was no agreement made with my mother. She didn't agree to it.
Yeah.
She didn't, like, I was arguing for years. One thing the Commission of Inquiry has cleared up, I've argued for years that, you know, I was told that they should, you know, my mother must have given consent for the vaccine trials, but she didn't know about it, because when she came to visit, she was complaining about the state, and there's no mention, and she never mentioned anything about it. She didn't know about it, and they said that in the Commission report, the final report, that they've accepted that the mothers didn't give consent for the vaccine trials.
Yeah, we should. I don't know what the situation was in your circumstance, but a family member, I won't breach confidentiality here, but a family member of mine was subject to vaccine trials, and it was a company called GlaxoSmithKline who conducted them. Have you any indication who conducted the trials?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
they were actually, originally they were called the Welcome Foundation.
The Welcome Foundation, they were, yes.
And yeah, GSK were the people I got. Like, when I went to look for my files, Mick, that was another thing that was very traumatic, I suppose. I asked the Sisters of Charity a number of years ago for my records, and they said they were destroyed in a fire.
That's just convenient. Yeah.
It wasn't true. It wasn't the truth. And I ended up getting back some of my records. But our problem is, and this is what I was speaking to Minister O'Gorman a few weeks ago, he rang a lot of survivors, and I was one of the people he rang. And I said to him, you know, I said, when you go to look for records, it's so traumatic. You're given the runaround, you're told, you know, like, these are your records. They're about yourself. You're not looking for somebody else's information.
Indeed.
Anyway, when I got the stuff back, sure, it was heavily redacted. So the parts of it blackened out, and it makes you more curious to know what they're blocking.
Yeah.
It might be nothing, but the same from the Welcome Foundation. They gave me a file for the vaccine trials, and a big folder, and I was, you know, opened up the folder, and sure, an awful lot of it was redacted. I don't know what it was in it, but they had it all redacted out anyway.
Yeah, I might come back to you on that one at a later stage, Francis, because that's an area I have a massive interest personally in because of family members, and I'd like to at least assist people as to how they might follow that path in itself. I presume you've been able to get a copy of your birth cert at that stage, is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Have you ever had any indication of who the biological father was?
Yes, I have. He married, he has a family. I've never met him. I suppose, look, time has passed. I have never met him, Mick, so, but I do know who he is. And,
okay.
I have a name. No, he's not on my birth cert, but I do know my mother who it was.
Yeah, no, because one of the issues that we've come across is that to make it difficult for people, names were changed, dates were changed, and a whole range of things like that. So, you were fostered for how long, Francis?
Well, I was there. I was with that family up to the age of 18 when I left.
Geez, that's a long time. The same family.
Yeah, I was with them a long time.
Yeah.
And my other brother was with them as well. I had another brother, like I said, that was born in 1969.
Yeah.
So he was with them. He went from St. Pat's out to them, and then I went a few years later.
Yeah. Well, based on what you're saying, you wouldn't have a great deal of confidence in the vetting that went on for foster parents.
Sure, there was no vetting. There was no vetting. Really. Now, it was a foster brother that abused me out in the house. It wasn't
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
It was still the responsibility. I was a kid.
Absolutely.
The responsibility of the state. I mean, the state had interfered in our lives, and I've said it before. What they did really, Mick, was they tore our family apart.
Oh, completely. Yeah. So, did you ever? Were you ever of the view that you could actually complain to the foster parents about what was going on, or were you conditioned to believe that somehow or other that you were an inferior compared to the biological child?
Well, abuse is all about control. And,
absolutely.
And the person that did this, said, look, you'll come back to the nuns, which was horrendous. I obviously didn't want to go back to Madonna House. And so I ended up it affected very dramatically. It affected me in my later life, I suppose. In my 20s, I drank an awful lot. I've said it before, so I may as well say it again. I slept around a lot, did a lot of different things that I wouldn't have. Maybe I would have, I don't know. But I think a lot of it was the feeling of kind of, well, sure.
You're worthless. You're worthless.
Yeah, worthless. It took me a long time to get my head together. I met Darren, of course, when I was 28. And, I got my life together then. And obviously I'm elected as a councillor now. But it took a long time. I wouldn't have been able for politics or anything in my 20s because I was rarely very sober, to be quite honest with you. I dragged my way through this.
Yeah. When you were at school then, Francis, were you ever made to feel different? Were you ever made to feel an outsider?
Yeah, I mean, there was a situation, Mick, where the maths teacher, it might sound very simplistic now, but as a child, these things do affect you. The maths teacher, there was a letter from my foster mother, and he said, "Who is this? This is not your name." And this was in front of the whole class, and no one really knew that and it was like, I'll tell you afterwards, that kind of way. And he said, no, I want to know now. And it was so, it's hard to explain. It was like, I was probably about 14, 15 at the time. And I just thought to the ground, I've broken up and swallowed me now at this stage.
Yeah, but, and that would have been in the mid to late 80s.
Yeah, it was.
It wasn't inside the dark ages of the 60s and the 70s.
No, it would have been 83, 84. And, it was fairly... You were kind of like, you kind of made feel like, I think the foster family made us feel like, well, we should be very grateful, people took us in because we nobody, and we were so lucky to have such a good family, and a good Catholic family at that.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. So can I ask you then? I mean, I've argued this with members of the Green Party when it was first broached a couple of months ago. That Minister O'Gorman, who I know very well and I know to be an honourable man, when I read that they were sealing records for 30 years, I complained bitterly about that because I thought to myself, who are you trying to protect? What was your thoughts when you discovered that?
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine, she's become a very good friend of mine now, Senator Francis Black, read out a letter I wrote. Of course, when you use any kind of channel that you can, but to get something done or to make your point known. So I wrote to Francis, and she read out my letter up in the Shannon. Okay. And the minister, they discussed it up there. But it was a very emotional letter because I spent a lot of time writing it and put a lot of thought into it. But I was absolutely horrified, is the bottom line. Like this, and the report says again and again, if you read the Commission of Inquiry, story after story, 500 people, went in to make submissions. And a lot of them are talking about identity. A lot of them are talking about theft of identity, robbing who they are, robbing, no birth certs, no information, make it so important because if you go to a hospital or go to a doctor, the first thing they'll say to you is,
Your medical record. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Is there a history of this in your family? And if you don't know, imagine being sitting there, and if you're having children, and some illnesses or some diseases and that can skip a generation, and it's important to know the facts.
Yeah, that's something I was going to ask you about, because to me, that should be the bottom line, is that people should be able to automatically access their family history. Now, in a circumstance I know, the biological mother essentially, how can I put it, dealt a double blow to this person by meeting up later in life when they were in their 40s and then disowning the person again. Now, how do you feel that people should, as a very basic, be able to demand their medical history, even if somebody, shall we say, is less than cooperative?
Absolutely. But I think, part of the commission recommends that we have a referendum on this issue. And I don't particularly think we need a referendum. I think if we have a referendum, I think it will pass. I do. I think people will vote yes. But I mean, I don't see why as a country we need to go through that, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I think people, we employ legislators, which are our TDs up in Cllr, and I think there's enough of them there that have good compassion. And I listened to the debates the other day, and particularly a note, I suppose, was Catherine Connolly, TD, that was excellent. And I have to say Mary Lou MacDonald was very good as well. The two on this issue, they were really, really good. And I think we've enough people up there that can put together proper legislation. And we that's why we pay the Attorney General so much money, let them come up with a law. And, look, we're adults at the end of the day. People, when somebody's 18, they should be able to get their information. And they should be able to decide then, good, bad, or indifferent. And if somebody doesn't want contact, if a mother or father don't want contact, look, it's emotional, it's sad, it's very sad. But at the end of the day, you're entitled to know. You're entitled to know where you came from, and you're entitled to know your medical history. And having to go through Cllr, having to go through somebody to get all that is absolutely crazy. To get a social worker so you can go and find your records. If you want to meet your mum, you have to get a social worker. I don't get that. I think it's just too much, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I read today, and it was a statement by a legal academic in Galway University, that you don't need to have a referendum, that there isn't, like, we didn't need to have a referendum for marriage equality. It could have been done through the law. They were just frightened of getting challenges. Is that something you would, I would imagine, welcome, that we would just have a legislative change and it would be done as a matter of course rather than as a matter of politics?
Yes, I think so. I think this is too much of an issue to be, like, I listened to some of the debate up in the Dáil the other day, and a bit of politics came into it, and I kind of sit and watching it in my sitting room thinking, look, forget politics. This is not about the left or the right. This is not about, this is about what's wrong and what was right. And very little of what happened in the institutions was right. I think most people accept that now. And I think now is a country for us to heal. We need our legislators to work together, every party and none, to sit up in Cllr and not to blame, Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael or Sinn Féin this is above politics. This is an issue that has affected, 163,000 we're told, but you have to think, Mick, as you know, like, there's brothers, sisters, so it's affected a lot more than 163,000. You could be talking.
Yeah, can I just put something to you as well, Francis, because I want to stand up for all the people I know. Most of what we're hearing took place because of the demographic nature of the nation at the time in Catholic-run homes. There were non-Catholic homes, and I've got a very good friend who's a member of the LGBT community who constantly feels let down because the whole issue of non-Catholic, I'm not going to call them Protestant, but non-Catholic homes virtually gets no coverage. Do you think that needs to be highlighted? Absolutely, and I mentioned at the start as well that there wasn't, I think, to be fair, I probably didn't mention the places, but I mentioned at the start that I was predominantly Catholic, but yes, there was the Bethany home,
which was horrendous.
Yeah.
People lived, and it was one of the most horrendous places. It was a hellhole, and they haven't got justice. They haven't got any justice at all.
Yeah.
And a very good friend of mine over in England, Terry Glenster, who lives, over there now, and he's like, that man is well in his 70s now. He's entitled to justice. He's entitled to answers.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Can I just conclude, Francis, by asking you, the word we all want is justice. Now, people are going to say that a lot of the people who perpetrated these injustices are no longer with us. To Francis Timmons, and I'm allowing you to speak for all those survivors that are still with us, what does justice look like? Can it only be measured in monetary terms? Or is that a start?
Well, it's a start. At this stage, I think what justice is we have to look after every survivor. We can't exclude, like I mentioned earlier, we can't exclude people that were under 6 months in an institution. Mm-hmm. Women had their children taken off them. That we need to look at medical, emotional and social supports for every survivor. Mm-hmm. And whatever way that's done, again, we've legislators up there, do it fairly. I'm not... Have it open and transparent once that's done. And the other thing that I think personally myself is that one of the greatest justices that we could do for the future, because we can't change the past. We can talk about it, we can come to terms with it, but we can't change it, unfortunately. So that's not going to, the apology in that, while it's welcome and it's without action, it's absolutely futile. And the other thing, make a mention, is we need to end institutional living, like direct provision, family hubs, stuff like that, because otherwise we're having a whole new generation of children that are grown up in different types of institutions, and they're not getting the rights. Every child should have a good start in life and should have the potential to be the best they can. So if we can do that, we could end direct provision, we could end family hubs, children growing up in hotel rooms, this type of stuff, and give people proper homes. Then that would be a great, and look at the legislation around child protection and really, really ensure that we look after children properly. Yep. Then, not that it will make a difference, but I think it will pay respect to the likes of my sister that died, and to so many people that didn't survive the institutions, and so many people that have passed on now without any sense of justice. Yep. But even telling, being able to tell a story, to speak about it, that's a great beginning.
Yeah. Just finally, Francis, we've discussed to a certain degree the so-called drug trials and the companies involved. Now, when I looked into this a few years ago, I went through some of the NGOs that you probably discussed it with as well, and I was told that when the Irish government spoke to GSK to take this issue up with them, they were told that if they persisted, that the pharmaceutical company would close down a factory in Cork, and it was quietly dropped. Do we think we still need to hold these companies to account? And that perhaps in this day and age, just like Holocaust survivors and a whole range of others, does mean compensation?
Absolutely. I mean, look, of course it does. And apparently GSK came out today and said they weren't paying anything towards compensation. Yeah. Apparently they came out today. I think that's disgraceful. I really do. I think they're one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. I mean, look at the money that's going to be made now coming up with the vaccine for the COVID. And never mind that's important. But yeah, I mean, people have to, there's a lot of survivors that are not, are in old age, that have health issues and stuff. Let's give them some comfort. Let's actually, that's our way now. That's all we can do, is make their life a bit easier going forward. Let's give them something to, as they go into old age. Even though we can't change the past, and it's not, money doesn't buy everything, but let's give them some comfort at this stage, and whatever that form that takes, if that's counselling, if it's medical cards, if it's whatever it is, let's, if it's providing a proper home for them so they don't have to worry about that, let's do it. Let's get them done. Can I mention, Mick, if I can? Sorry, I'm conscious of the time, and I want to mention myself and Terry Harrison. Terry's a very good friend of mine, who was in Besper and she's a survivor herself. We set up as a listening service for survivors, and if I could give the number, that'd be very useful.
Please do, and I will put it out as well. Mm-hmm.
Yes, please. The number is 085 806 9921, and I'd encourage anybody, survivors.
085
806 9921.
21. And that's just yourself and Terry, is that right?
Well, we have volunteers manning the lines as well. But look, it's in the early, with COVID, it's a bit difficult. We did have a base, but obviously with COVID, we had to kind of abandon that at the minute.
I'll get that out there. But Francis Timmons, it's always an honour to talk to you. You're one of the strong characters. You're one of the moral characters. You're a tribute to the LGBT community, and you're also a tribute to Ireland. So thank you for your time today, and we look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you, Mick.
My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say